us started, Eric Birch was Natural Resource Staff Officer on the Rogue River-Siskiyou National Forest. And we'd been having meetings, and I think it was Joni Brazier, who was worried about a big pile up in the High Cascades districts and the effects on soils. So we started having these meetings about burn boxes or alternatives to burning. And when this collaborative forest landscape restoration project got funded, this was one of the first little projects to get funded a couple of years ago. And it was basically, at some point during those meetings, we pulled in Jack and said, Jack, you know, you more than anyone else I know about all the potential ways of treating fuels and bringing material onto a landing and working with large equipment. So we were having discussions with Jack, and we said, let's put together a little feasibility study and see what these alternatives are and look at it all in one place. So been working on it for a couple of years off and on, but we finally have pulled it together, and we want to give you the highlights today. So we're just really glad that folks came. Our basic message is that we need maybe perhaps a little bit of a paradigm shift. You haven't heard that for a while, have you? Which is mainly, if you're really under our Rogue Basin, I work with a lot of you know, the Rogue Basin cohesive strategy estimates that we have to treat almost 100,000 acres a year just for maintenance alone. And we're lucky if what we're doing, maybe 25,000 that we're treating a year. And so there probably aren't enough days in the year to get all the burning done that needs to be done. So there are logical ways, reasons, places where some of these alternatives would work really, really well. In particular, Jack's pretty excited about I'll just point you towards this when it comes up, the forwarder idea, which allows an entry to bring in commercial and biomass at the same time during one entry, and has a lot of other good things about it, but I don't want to spoil it. So last thing I want to say is that SOFRC coordinates a group, the Rogue Forest Partners and Service and BLM are part of it, and a lot of you work with it. Right now, one of our projects that's part of this pivot is looking at Douglas fir mortality. BLM and the Forest Service are both working on it, and there's probably a need to look at what's going on private ground as well. And so this was another reason why this feasibility study seemed like a real complement to figuring out what we're going to do in the next 10 years. So with that, I want to introduce Jack, and Jack, be sure to give your whole history.
Thank you, Terry. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jack LeRoy. I was born here in the Valley and spent my entire working career as a forest contractor, as a forest road builder when there used to be a lot of that going on, as a logging contractor. When stewardship came along, I did a lot of stewardship type projects. We were always being challenged with what to do with the material and to always try and market it to its best value to get some return on it to reduce the cost. Some of the barriers that we had back then and still exist today are the cost of fuels treatments. It's expensive. So I'm retired. I retired out of working in the woods 3 years ago, and but I'm not done. I just had to change what I was doing. So when this opportunity came along, it was really exciting for me because through stewardship, through the equipment that I had and the applications that I put it to, through the AFR project in Ashland, and having the opportunity, we were the ground-based logging contractor on that, as well as taking care of the roads and getting rid of a lot of the biomass on that project. We had the opportunity up there because of the constraints we ran into to utilize a lot of the technology that we're talking about today. And I was disappointed that from that project, nobody was able to really pick up on that technology and take it forward. And now here we are today confronted with the amount of fuels reduction, as Terry stated, that has to be done. And the big question is, how are we gonna get it all done? So there's certainly a place for mechanized fuels reduction, and there's also opportunities on things we've learned in the past about the best disposal methods. I'm excited to hear so many of you mention biochar. Biochar can certainly be a big component. It's all gonna boil down to the value that everyone puts on it. That's really what it's gonna come down to. But can forest biomass be turned into biochar? Absolutely, and it can be done on a large scale. So, so with that, we'll start our study. You know, this all started, like Eric mentioned, that this all started out of learning about the burn box. And because I had experience with the burn box, had the opportunity to talk to Terry and Eric about that. And then we said, okay, but you know, you still have to get that material to the burn box. So how do we do that? So that opened the door for the bigger picture and the study that we actually undertook to introduce technology. So that's where we are today. So we'll move forward. So we're going to talk about mastication. We're going to talk about harvesters and foragers. We're going to talk about burn boxes and biochar. It sounds like we have a lot of people interested in that, so that's exciting. Biomass transports to market. How do we, if we collect the biomass, how do we get it to a market? Agreements and partnerships. And then at the end of it, we'll do questions and answers. We'll take a break. We'll probably try and take a little bit of a break halfway through this. We'll see where we're at. But we're willing to do questions and answers for as long as anybody wants to stay here after that. It's going to take us pretty much till 2 o'clock to cover everything that we need to cover. But so we'll cover the questions and answers. So we know why we're here. We know the high volume of fire fuels driven by insects, drought, wildfire, increasing temperatures. Along with pile burning, through the investigative process of this study, I had the opportunity to talk to Oregon DEQ on several levels and their concern. And we kind of know that burning in any means in the forest is going to be starting to be challenged more and more. It's going to be more difficult to do that. So we're going to talk about innovative mechanical thinning and biomass disposal to help alleviate that. We're going to talk about disposing in a burn box, which has lower emissions and pretty much reduces the smoke and the particulate into the air down to a minute level at that point. So our first method, mastication. Mastication has been around for a long time. It's been done for a long time. It still has a place. The problem that we see in Southern Oregon, particularly in the Applegate, is that there is so much fuel on the ground. It's important to state that this study is all about preparing the ground to reduce the fuel level to the point where prescribed burning can be initiated. When you're through with fuels reduction, you've set that unit up or that land for long-range management, which is the long-range management plan of prescribed burning to let fire take care of the maintenance. Back when we were doing stewardship, one of the problems that we ran into is we did a lot of mastication, we did a lot of fuels reduction, but there was never a long-range plan in place that would deal with the fuel that grew back. So that solution now is going to be prescribed burning. So that's what we're looking at setting up for. So with mastication, again, as I mentioned in Southern Oregon, the Applegate Valley, there is so much fuel already on the ground on the forest floor. Mastication doesn't get rid of the fuel. It grinds it up and it leaves it on the forest floor. And so the buildup in most areas would be too significant to ever consider broadcast burning at that point. It's gonna burn, there's too much fuel there, it's gonna get too hot, tree mortality is gonna be high, and it's gonna be hard to control. So, mastication, has its limitations from that respect. When we look at, the small woodland owner, and maybe on their plot, they don't have that fuel load on the ground. There's areas out there that do exist that are that way, that mastication would be a very good fit. When we talk about mastication, there are a number of machines that are available to put masticators on. The most popular are excavators. Construction excavators are everywhere. Compared to forestry equipment, they're relatively inexpensive. A contractor can have one of those. If mastication doesn't work out, they can put the bucket back on it and go back to digging. So it is the most popular, but it's also the worst application of equipment for working in the forest that there is. It was never built as a forestry machine, so it was never guarded to work in the woods. One of the biggest significant problems with it, with the lack of guarding on it, is you're out there grinding and you're throwing all these small pieces of wood in the air. They come down, they land on the excavator, and they go right in. The screens and everything on it were never intended to stop things like that because they don't have it in the construction world. So all those pieces go into that machine and they build up in really hot places around the engine. It's only a matter of time, if you don't clean that out every day, it's only a matter of time before you create a machine fire, which usually sets the forest on fire at the same time. One of the other problems that you encounter with it, a masticating head is very heavy. And so when foresters look at the ground pressure that the machine is rated at, and then you hang this heavy piece of equipment out on the end, and it's almost always used at the full reach of the boom, which means the front tracks of that machine are going to have 10 times more ground pressure on the ground than what you would see advertised. It's not sitting level, it's not sitting flat. So you'll see a significant amount of soil compaction. Doesn't turn well, you disturb the soil in very big ways. You create really large berms everywhere you take it. So that's the downside of it. When we compare mastication equipment, we look at a harvester with a masticator. A harvester, when we say harvester, we're talking about a cut to length operation. There is harvester equipment out there manufactured that's designed to harvest trees and that sort of thing, but it's adaptable to a mastication head. It has the ability to climb steep slopes. The one that we refer to the most is manufactured by Ponzi. Ponzi's the leader in harvester forwarder type of equipment. They're also the most innovative. There are a lot of other ones out there that would work just fine, but most of my knowledge is around Ponzi equipment. So when you look at that, and you look at putting a masticating head on it, it's designed to be in the forest. It's designed, now they say it's suitable up to slopes to 45%. You know, I would probably wouldn't take it over 40%, but it's capable of doing that. It's capable of very low ground pressure. It's very maneuverable. It is the most eco-friendly piece of equipment that you can put out there. The downside of that is it's very expensive equipment. But when we talk about forestry applications, it gets expensive no matter what we do. So compact track excavators certainly have their place. Most common, small woodland owners, especially in combination with some of the burn boxes that we'll talk about. Skid steers with masticators are fairly popular, but limited to the small woodland owner or private ground. It's a good alternative. Purpose-built masticator type dozers, a manufacturer, Fecon is an example. They manufacture some very high horsepower, some very serious machines. They also have a place that will give you some really high production. When we look at the chart that's up here, the production rate is rated by high, medium, and low. And, you can see that the Thecon, equipment is really high production. It's good equipment. We've used it and, we're amazed at what it would be able to do. It also has the ability to mulch the biomass into the soil, provided it's not a real rocky soil, which has always amazed me as a good feature, because you can actually grind that material right into the soil. So that's a great application. So takeaways from mastication. Rubber tired harvesters. This is a Ponzi harvester in the picture. If it's on real steep ground or wet soil conditions, it would be operating with what's called a set of eco tracks, which are steel tracks that go over the tires, which further reduce the ground pressure and reduce the amount of soil disturbance. So again, these are the most eco-friendly machines that you can put in the forest. So they're very maneuverable, their production is high. And again, but they still run up against that barrier of how much material can you have on the ground, and without putting too much there that would restrict prescribed burning. So, so whether we talk about burn boxes or we talk about extracting biomass and taking it to markets, you still have to get it out of the woods. You still have to collect it and get it to a landing where you can process it and get it on a truck and get it to its destination or get it into a burn box. So how do we efficiently transport biomass to landings and dispose of it in financially feasible ways? And the word financially is a key word here, because it doesn't matter what you do when you touch biomass, it gets expensive really quick. So we're going to talk about harvesters and forwarders. We're going to talk about Ponzi a little bit. Ponzi, I was consulting to the Forest Service out of Phoenix, Arizona about 5 years ago. And Ponzi was there to demonstrate the capability of their biomass equipment. And what they were demonstrating was a harvester and a forwarder in combination. And what they were harvesting was juniper. And the juniper down there has literally taken over all of their grassland. Their state animal was the antelope, which has literally disappeared from the area because the juniper had taken over all the rangeland and consumed all the water. So they were looking at, they've got to get rid of this. So Ponzi went there and did a demonstration. Ponzi started their program in 2006. They're based out of Finland, and they built specific equipment for harvesting what they call bioenergy. And it was very successful in Finland and European forests, but it never actually got here. At the time we were doing stewardship, we had a cut the length operation with a forwarder and a harvester as well. And we did collect a lot of biomass with it, but at the time we were doing stewardship, we just couldn't create the interest, and nobody really could see the need of where this was going to go, of what we really, how big this problem of biomass and fire fuels was going to become. So I was hired to go down and work with the city of Phoenix. They called it the greater area, which was a pretty big area. They're the largest stewardship contract that the federal government has ever put on was called SOFRC, which came out of the Phoenix, Arizona, southern Utah area. And so I went down and spent a week down there with them working on that. But it did give me the opportunity to also meet the people with Ponzi and look at their energy harvesting equipment. So with the method of harvesters and forwarders, with the situation we have on the Applegate with the dead and dying, with the fact that we're going to try and sell timber out there as well, With a harvester forwarder, it would enable you to do single entry into a unit, complete all the harvesting, removal of dead and dying, and biomass fuels in one entry. You go in there, when you leave, the unit has been prepared for long-range management of prescribed burning. So there's some real cost advantages to doing it that way. We know that we have, if we go in now and we take out, for an example, if we take out the dead and dying, we make an entry in, we build trails to the dead and dying, we come out of there. We still have a fuels problem in there. Maybe there needs to be a commercial thinning project in there as part of the fuels. But traditionally, we've only done one thing at a time. In this case, we need to do it all. We need, from a feasibility standpoint, from a transportation standpoint, we need only go in there once, treat that unit, move on to the next one. So, the advantages, it's going to minimize the soil disturbance. It's going to reduce the road maintenance and access to that unit. It's going to minimize the use of personnel to manage that project. Instead of going in with multiple operations to the same unit, we're only going to use one management team to go in there once and get it done. So that's some of the advantages of that. So harvesters have the ability, they typically use a dangle head processor, which is how they cut down merchantable trees. They go out with a boom, it grabs the tree, it cuts it off with a big bar saw, it runs it through, it measures it, it processes, it cuts it to length, and it leaves it along a skid trail. And works its way through the woods to be followed up with a forwarder that comes through there, picks all that material up, puts it on its bunks, and transports it to the landing. You're not dragging anything. Everything is typically not over 25 feet in length. So skid trails can tolerate a lot sharper turns and corners in it because you're not dragging whole trees rubbing against all the leaf trees. So those are some of the advantages. Typically, cut to length is not popular here because it's a more expensive method of logging. It costs more to do it that way. And we're of the mindset down here that we want whole tree. We want to bring the whole tree to the landing. We want to process the log at the landing. We want to strip all the limbs off and all our waste wood put in a big pile, and then we'll worry about the pile later. And that's typically what's happened. So under the stewardship for both the BLM and the Forest Service in the Butte Falls to Prospect districts, there was a buildup, there was an accumulation of years of that going on. But the stewardship gave us the opportunity to go up there and harvest all that material, which in that case we reopened existing landings. We went in and we ground all that material up, and through an agreement with Biomass One, we transported it all to Biomass One. When you think about the scale, when you think of a 48-foot chip trailer and how big that is, our average to Biomass One was 20 loads a day. That was always our target. That's a lot of material. There are days when I think we did get over 40 loads at a few times if our distance wasn't very far. But the point is, when you build these big piles and you don't want to burn them, that's the kind of scale that we were looking at to get all that material treated and delivered to Biomass One. The benefits to Biomass One are pretty much self-evident. We're going to take this material and we're going to turn it into electrical energy. And we're going to do it at much, much reduced emissions. Darren here is with Biomass One today, and there's certainly a willing partner in this if we take a look at going back to that. But we're not putting that particulate in the air. We're not putting that smoke in the air. They've got its scrubber systems, and they're bound by the EPA. They're limited in what they can do. And so it's a very clean process to burn that there and generate electricity to get something back for it instead of just traditionally sending it up in smoke. And at the same time now, they manufacture biochar. They pull the burnt wood right off the bottom of their boiler. It comes out of there as biochar. The only cost they have in it is their loss of some of the BTUs because that wood's not, it's charred, it's not completely burned. So it's still got some BTUs left in it. So, that's the only thing that, they're giving up to create biochar. So, they're a good supplier of biochar. They're a good source of biochar. So, so the process, when this harvester goes through and it performs the harvest, puts down the logs, and it goes onto a forwarder. The forwarder has the ability, and of course, the harvester will know when it grabs onto a tree, whether it's gonna make a saw log, whether it's gonna make a veneer log, whether it's gonna make pulpwood. And so it's cut and manufactured to what the end user is going to require. And that sort is easily done on a forwarder. So when that material gets to the landing, traditional log trucks are coming and all this material is going out. And it's going to markets that we traditionally don't utilize. We have in stewardship. The problems we had in stewardship is we created a lot, we actually harvested a lot of suppressed Doug fir, which had a lot of rings per inch, had a very high density. And at the time we were saying, there ought to be somebody that can use this. So we introduced it to markets and most of that wood came off the Big Deep Springs watershed. And we sent it to a couple of mills. We trucked it to some mills. They milled it up. It was beautiful wood. We had, all of a sudden, we had entrepreneurs trying to manufacture flooring out of it and a lot of different applications. And at the time, the Medford Water Commission was going to build a new caretaker's home up there at the Big Beach Springs watershed. And so all the flooring in that home, all the cabinets and everything were done with that suppressed Doug fir. So we started building on that market. We created an interest in the market. We created entrepreneurs who were willing to mill it and manufacture it into products. And we could see that being something that was going to reduce the cost of fuels reduction, only to stop stewardship projects. They did not continue with those, and we just dropped that market. And so the point that I'm trying to make here, when we talk about all the markets that we can take this to, we have entrepreneurs that can utilize a lot of this material, but they have to know that they're going to be able to get the material and that there's a long range plan for it. So, so whatever's done in taking this material out of the woods, there's marketability to it, but you've got to build that market. And right now you pretty much have to start from scratch. And it can and it will happen if it's done, but it has to be done under a long-term contract to assure that that material is available. So when we talk about the harvester has a lot of different attachments for it. They're easy to change. There are a lot of different felling heads, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's go to the, we pretty much talked about that. Let's go to the next slide. So here's a biomass harvesting head made by Ponzi. What this is it's a multi-stem grappling head with a set of shears on it. Shears are much cheaper to operate and maintain, and they're much faster than bar saws. This head's specifically designed to go in and get biomass. And when I say multi-stemming, you see the little yellow arms on that. It can grab one tree, cut it off, go grab another tree, hang on to the one tree it cut, grab another one until it's full. And then it can lay that down on the ground. If it needs to cut it up shorter, it can reach up high, cut a tree off up high, hold on to that top of that tree, bring it down to the bottom of the tree, cut again, and it's got that whole tree. It's what brings speed to this operation to to improve the economics. This is a harvesting head. There's a number of harvesting heads made. They're gaining in popularity. We actually had one show up at the Oregon Logging Conference this year in Eugene. So there are other people starting to think about it now. So, but this will enable the harvester to go out and collect the biomass. Typically, in a typical unit, if there's a commercial component out there, it would go out and do the commercial harvest with a dangle head on it and process all the merch trees. It would, when it's done with that, it would go back and switch to this type of head and go in and collect all the biomass. It would distribute the biomass along the skid trails so the forwarder can come along and pick it all up, load it all out, and take it to the landing. So one of the big questions is how much wood can a forwarder possibly hold? So let's go to our next slide. So there's a good example. And we've done it with our forwarder, and it's just amazing. In this case, Ponzi made hydraulic arms that compress that material on the forwarder itself. It's specifically designed to go after biomass. And it also works to bring the merch logs out. These hydraulic arms don't affect whether you're hauling merch wood or whether you're hauling biomass, but it gives you the capacity. When we were on AFR and I was working with Don Boucher, we had our forwarder up there because we were collecting biomass and taking it to a burn box. But in that process, Don said, hey, we got all these hand piles out here. Can you go get them? So I went out, I took a look at it. There were no trails built for that forwarder to go to provide good access, but they thinned enough trees out there that I could get in between all the trees. And I ended up putting about 50 hand piles on the forwarder for one trip. And that trip was like 30 minutes. And I had 50 piles collected and transported back to the burn box. So it's doable. Ponzi put a lot of energy, a lot of thought into their technology. Their technology was perfected. I got a chance to see it work. I can tell you it works very, very well. So let's go to the next one. So this is a multi-stemming harvesting head. This is when I say dangle head, this is what it is. This particular one, again, has accumulator arms on it. So if you're talking about small diameter and it's going to go to pulpwood, for example, you need all the limbs off from it. Again, you can grab multiple trees, bunch them all together, strip all the limbs off and cut them to the length you want. They'll be placed along the skid trail for the forwarder to come along and pick it up and take it out, and which then it will end up on a truck and it'll be going to pulpwood. Pulpwood here, for those of you who are not aware, Roseburg Lumber Company opened up a pulpwood site here about 2.5 years ago. It's out in White City, and even dead and dying, there's a lot of trees that still have good value as pulpwood, even though they may have been dead for a while. They won't make a saw log, they won't make a veneer log, but they will make a pulpwood log. And then lastly, there's potential that they could go to biomass one as hog fuel. So that particular head again is capable of multi-stemming and works very well. It's not capable of cutting large trees. Again, you'd have to, if you're doing commercial harvest of commercial mill logs, they would switch to another head that has more capacity to do that. So I think I'm way behind you.
Trying to keep up with you.
So, okay, so our key takeaways. This methodology is efficient, it's versatile, it's environmentally friendly. It is easy enough on the ground that it could have extended an extended working period into wetter weather. Ground compaction is not near the issue with it. Ground disturbance is not the issue with it. So its operating season could be extended to perform the harvest. And here in Southern Oregon, we deal with a pretty restricted season. Fire season now has come into play earlier and earlier. And with those restrictions, considering the investment of the equipment, it only raises the cost every time we shorten that season. So the fact that it's so environmentally friendly could actually extend the time that it could be utilized. So again, the concept, when we talk about a paradigm shift, traditionally, this actually defies tradition in a lot of ways. When we talk about a single entry operation, that's what really needs to happen here if we're going to get the cost down. So we need to get our NEPA done. We need to do everything that needs to be done to get us in there. That's going to allow us to complete everything needed in that unit and be done with it. Okay, burn boxes. When AFR was going on in Ashland, everything went pretty well until we got down to a trailhead called White Rabbit. White Rabbit had a helicopter log landing site there. They brought in all the logs there. They were limbed. We ended up with a huge mess there. And it's a popular trailhead for recreationalists, and recreation is a big component for Ashland. So that needed to be cleaned up, and the only way that we could see feasible was to bring in a burn box and dispose of that material in a burn box. So we were able to find a burn box up in Washington. We were able to rent that box, and so we brought it down and we put it to work. And that was new technology during that time. There weren't any burn boxes out here, very few of them. And so we really tried to take that technology to every conceivable scenario that we could think of while we had it here. We invited Oregon DEQ out, who did emissions testing on it. We did a lot of different scenarios to increase production. We just put it to as many things as we could think of. And actually, when we were done with it, when we looked at making biochar was also at the time in its infancy. So under another grant, Wood Innovation Grant, we were able to hire an engineering group, Evergreen Engineering out of Eugene, did a heat study on the box to determine if there was enough heat in that box to put a stainless tube through the box with an auger in it, to put chipped wood through it, to create the pyrolysis to transform the wood chips into biomass. And we found out that there was more than enough wood, heat in that box to do that process. Everything was successful. But what we learned with that box was amazing. There's basically two manufacturers available in the United States. Air burners located in Florida, and Tiger Cat, which is manufactured in Ontario, Canada. So those are your two choices if you're going to buy a commercial big burn box. So
You want to start talking about them, or should I go back?
no, we're good. Air burners out of Florida manufactures a number of small trailer mounted units. These trailer mounts, and of those, they partnered with the Rocky Mountain Research Station, US Forest Service, to develop a trailer mounted burner that would produce biochar. So it's a fairly popular box because it works well for the small woodlands owner. It works well for rural communities that need to clean up small properties around their home or that sort of thing. They can trailer these things in. They can make biochar if they want to. it's a good method for disposing of material on small lots. At the same time, AirBurner makes the really big boxes. The big boxes, application is in landscape scale. If we're treating units of 50 or 100 acres or 150 acres, you're into the really big boxes. These only produce, 1/2 to 1 ton of biomass an hour. Calculate that out. You're gonna, at the end of the day, so maybe you get rid of 8 tons of biomass. On a small woodland project, that's probably quite a bit. It would far exceed the kilns and things like that people are utilizing now. So it would be a good step forward. This particular box does not create, this is the Burn Boss, does not create biochar. So let's go to the next slide. So they also make a track-driven model. I see the benefit of this track model in that small woodland owners don't have to bring their wood to a landing or a central location on their property. They can take this will traverse across their property. They can use a small excavator or skid steer and supply it with wood. So it would eliminate the cost of transporting material. It does not have, because it doesn't have wheels on it, it has to be put on a trailer and trailered everywhere. But at the same time, it can still be pulled with a 1-ton pickup or truck. So that's the benefit of using that technology. So again, this box does not make biochar. So let's go to the next one. So this is their Firebox series. I think we have a slide of the Char Boss.
Yes.
Yeah, let's go to the Char Boss before we go to that. So this is what they call the Char Boss. This model is actually patented. It's a shared patent between AirBurners and the US Forest Service. But this was designed to manufacture biochar. And again, its production in processing biomass is about 1 ton an hour. It's towable behind a pickup. Takes very little diesel fuel. It does require water, requires a water supply. The biochar has got to be quenched. It's coming off the bottom of the burner. So it's going to come out of there on fire. It's got trays underneath it that actually form a water bath that's going to extinguish the fire in that biochar and bring it out the back. But Rocky Mountain Research Station puts a pretty high value on biochar. They just published a paper by our local biochar expert, Kelpie Wilson. And they explain, I'm sure if anybody's into biochar, they know who she is. And so she had an opportunity to work with this along with the kilns and everything that she offers. But the research station has done a lot of soil work with biochar and considers it as something that could be a valuable soil enhancement for the forest. So that's a Char Boss. Their big series, the Firebox series. This is the machine that we used on AFR, and it's got some Achilles heels. There's no doubt about it. It's really difficult to move. It sets on the ground. There's no bottom in it. So you're burning right on top of the ground. This thing weighs in at about 58,000 pounds. We moved it from site to site. We pulled it with a D7 dozer and we pushed it with a 2154 John Deere log loader at the same time. And it took both of them to get this box to move. And their method for cleaning this box out is it has a door on the other end of it, and that door opens, but it's still got braces across there, is to reach in there with a backhoe and dig all the ash out of it every day, which ash accumulation, if you're really pushing this box, will build up relatively quickly. So the problem with that is that these boxes are lined with a refractory material. It is the heat insulation that protects, everything around it. It protects the box from just burning up. And so, that refractory material is a very high silicone content and, it's very fragile. So, we learned right away, backhoes are not the answer. Digging this thing out with a backhoe, you're gonna be replacing this refractory. All the panels in the side of that are replaceable and they contain that refractory material. So, what we ended up doing is we ended up picking the entire box up with our 2154 log loader and just scooting it over. But you gotta keep in mind, when you pick this thing up, you're dumping out a lot of really hot material that the air is just now gonna get to, and things are gonna get really hot really quick. So, and then when you do drag it down, we went to a number of different units and sites on that project. And there was no way we were gonna get lowboys in there to move this thing. We just had to drag it. And so by dragging it, you're leaving a trail of this burning material, even if it's been in there for 2 or 3 days. Once it gets shifted around and vibrated a little bit, that material dumps out of it and it goes right on the road and everything. It's just burning material. Once the air hits it, it starts flaming. So, when you go to use a box like this, we found out very early on, when you see this machine operating, there's really no visible particulate leaving this box. You just don't see any, but that doesn't mean it's not there. Start the box up at night or run it into the evening or start it before daylight in the morning. And you'll see it just showering these embers out of it. And as you get closer to fire season, all of a sudden you'll notice all these little spot fires showing up. So, when you look at the cost of operating one of these boxes, in the middle of winter, it's not really a factor. But if you're pushing towards fire season, I would say you need to stop when a fire season officially starts, unless you're in an area, maybe you're in an old burn, maybe you're in an area that burned the year before and you're treating material, not really a factor. But in most cases, because of the risk of fire, you've got to have this thing manned with at least a Class 6 fire truck, if not a water tender of 3,000 gallons or something like that, to tend this thing, and you've got to have crew available to go put these fires out. We spent a lot of time, the closer we got to fire season, the more time we spent looking for little fires and putting them out. So those are some of the Achilles heels of using this thing. Production, when we talk about cost, production on these is rated at 9 to 11 tons. We found that number to be fairly accurate. To reach 11 tons or more, it has to be tended often. You need to keep it as full as you can. Material inside of it, with the experiments we did, we consistently hit 1200 degrees and 1200 degrees on wet pine that was just cut. It's dripping wet and may have had snow on it. And it goes right to 1200 degrees. It's amazing how hot these things get. And that's where they get their efficiency and where they reduce a lot of their particulate and emissions. But DEQ loves them. They think they're great. They're a little bit undecided. Oh, I shouldn't say a little bit. They're actually a lot undecided on permitting one of these. It does require a permit. Right now they have a permit fee of I think it's $850 for the application, and the annual permit for it, it's like $1,700. But you get the permit for 1 year. Then it transfers to the EPA. I never actually got a definitive answer from the EPA on what they charge, because they're still developing what they think they need to charge for these boxes. But they threw some numbers out there, $35,000 to $70,000 a year for a permit from the EPA. Now, I think that's not going to stick. I think that our federal government realizes what we're up against with wildland fires here. And if these things are part of the solution, they're certainly not going to carry that kind of permitting fee. So that's just shooting yourself in the foot. So, but they didn't give me the say on it. So That's what I found out in doing the research. It is a big factor. This particular box does not make biochar. When we would lift it up, we had a mountain of biochar underneath it, and we quickly watered it down and put that biochar out and saved it. And then we distributed the biochar to interested parties that were gonna go work with it, because at the time, biochar was in its infancy. Nobody even knew what biochar was, and what the potential benefits would be. So that's what AirBurner offers. The only efficient way to move this, there's a trailer manufactured by a company called Landau. It's a movable axle trailer, that you would, if you were going to select this box, you would go with one of these trailers. It has the ability to tilt down, pick the end of that up and put it on the trailer all by itself. Even though you're on unimproved roads, you would end up putting a lot of energy into utilizing that trailer over dragging them. Dragging them is just not the answer. So options. So let's go to the next one. So TigerCat is a forestry equipment company that's been around for a long time. They saw the need, they saw the interest, and got on board with their version of the AirBurner. And they solved a lot of the problems. They solved the mobility problem. They put it on tracks. It's remote controlled, so you can drive it anywhere you want to go. It weighs in at 80,000 pounds. It's heavy, so it's going to come in on a 9-axle lowboy. But once you get it unloaded, you can take it wherever you need to go. You can take it from landing to landing in different units, and much more efficient. They solve the mobility problem. With that, this they call it the carbonizer. It makes biochar. And I talked to TigerCat several times about it. You can't make it not make biochar. By design, it's gonna make biochar no matter what. Requires a lot of water because the biochar is continuously coming out of it. It's got a rating of 60 to 210 gallons of water an hour, which still puts you in the class of a 3,000 gallon water tender as a supply. You know, I heard some of you back there that are either manufacturing biochar or want to manufacture biochar. This is a method. This is a way to do it on a big scale. Probably if you're looking at all the costs and operating this machine and everything, and then marketing your biochar, it's not gonna pay its way. It's just not gonna do it. This is an expensive machine to operate. What we found is whether you're running a AirBurner box or the TigerCat box, either one, if you're doing landscape scale fields reduction, you can't do one of these boxes. You need two of them. The equipment has the capacity to feed 2 boxes and tend 2 boxes and take care of 2 boxes. And when you talk about production rates of 11 green tons an hour, at the most, you're talking about at the end of the day, you process 2 48-foot chip trailer loads of wood through 1 box. That's it. That's a slow process. So, if you're looking at the investment, you're not gonna say, I'm gonna go buy one of those. No, you're gonna go buy 2 of them. And they're gonna be done in tandem. If you're using a harvester forwarder, you're using the forwarder to feed these boxes. The forwarder is gonna go out and collect that biomass material out of the unit. It's gonna take it right down, and it's gonna put it in these boxes while it's burning, and then it's gonna go get more of it. And it's a continuous operation, but it has the capacity to supply both these boxes and then some. So some of the material gets set aside in the landing, be picked up and utilized later. When you consider burn box operations and you consider all the infrastructure required or the extra equipment to go with it, it's a considerable investment. This tiger cap, for example, without the tariffs, is about $850,000. Yeah, yeah, ooh, yeah, that's what I said. So the air burner box, the large air burner box, you're in the $250,000 to $300,000 range to get one delivered out here. Considerable difference in cost, but the advantage is the mobility of this box more than outweighs the cost. It's expensive, but everything is driven by production, and to get that production, it's simply going to cost a lot of money. So here you can see, you know, how hot this gets. It is incredibly hot. 1200 degrees. Here you can see the refractory, those blocks on the walls. That's a sensitive material that you simply cannot damage. So key takeaways is on-site processing and biochar production for soil enhancement. You know, I've said many times, the feasibility of biochar, making biochar, is completely dependent on your ability to market that biochar or the value that the Forest Service or the BLM or one of the agencies would put on that biochar. Rocky Mountain Research Station, we have our written report coming out soon, and it goes into detail about all the testing and research that has been done and the value placed on biochar. And and the studies have been done are referenced in there. So you can take a look at that, but as land managers, you look at the value, it's going to be what value you put on that biochar. In this case, in this operation, in fields reduction, that biochar could easily be taken right out of the box, quenched, put on all the trails and soil disturbance that you created in that unit to enhance the soil and get a faster recovery and a more productive soil out of it. So, there's going to have to be some homework done on what that value is and what's best going to work. So, okay, I think we've covered everything on that. Transporting biomass to markets. When we talk about transporting biomass, when we talk about grinding biomass into hog fuel and taking it to Biomass One, and by the way, I happen to be a huge supporter of Biomass One, not because I like the guys, but I do, but very few people realize the benefit that Biomass One has for this valley and the contribution they make to this valley. We're unique in that we have, for about a 45-mile radius around the biomass plant, it's feasible to bring that material into Biomass One and to turn it into energy instead of traditionally lighting it on fire and sending it up as pollutants. To me, personally, that means a lot. I put a very high value on the fact that we have a Biomass One plant here in Jackson County. This study is to cover all of Rogue River-Siskiyou National Forest, clear to Gold Beach and that sort of thing. We don't have that opportunity anywhere but here. When we get close to Coos Bay, we start getting into facilities there that maybe could be reached, but probably not. So I want to emphasize the importance. During the time that we were hauling material to Biomass One, when the Forest Service built all the roads in our forest system, they built them to get log trucks in and out. That was the whole purpose of all those roads. And they do that very well. They do not do 48-foot chip trailers well. They simply will not make a lot of corners. They simply won't climb the grades when they're empty and that sort of thing. And so during the stewardship work that we did and the work we did in chipping, we usually had something in our contract to improve the roads or to fix areas of the road, widen the corner, take out, something in that road that prevented us from getting chip trailers in. And then that was still done on a limited basis because there were only a few roads that needed just a little bit of work that the agency could afford to do. We couldn't go in there. There's a lot of roads, so areas where we just couldn't go because there's too much work required to get these chip trailers in there. So Western Trailer out of Boise, Idaho, and this was 14 years ago, came up with the idea, because we weren't the only ones with this problem, came up with the idea that they would build an experimental trailer that had the capability to steer the back of the trailer. So if you look at the back axles, you can see the back axles, they carry the third axle until they're out on the highway. The other two axles are steerable axles controlled by the truck. With this truck and trailer combination, it will literally go every place you can take a log truck. And it will do it reliably day in and day out. So they put that with an all-wheel drive truck, which enables it to pull the grades that a log truck would pull without being assisted. For us, we would constantly run into grades in the logging road system, pulling these trailers in empty, where we had to park a skidder there and a dedicated operator solely to help the trucks get up that grade and get over it, to get into where we were chipping. And so, by going to the all-wheel drive truck, they solved this problem. At the time, a contractor in Washington State bought 4 of these combinations. And I went up there and I talked to Western Trailer. They gave me the contact's name, was able to get in touch with them, and I spent a day with them watching these trailers work. And it was nothing short of amazing. Completely solved the transportation problem. Every issue we ever had with getting biomass out of the woods centered around transportation. How do we get it out of the woods? This literally solved that problem. The problem we had, we would have loved to have gone down and bought a fleet of these. 4 or 5 of them would have been great. The problem we had is, and we'll talk about this a little later when we talk about contracting. We were a contractor that had already invested over $500,000 in a grinder, log loaders, and all this support equipment and all these trucks and trailers to be able to process biomass and deliver it to Biomass One. Our business plan literally was centered around one market. That is not a good plan. And to bring that home, Biomass One operated for years under an agreement with the PUC commissioner to give them a return on building the plant, to pay them back for building the Biomass One plant. And so they were getting a higher value for their electricity. And I don't remember the numbers exactly, but I know you were getting, Biomass One at the time was getting like as much as 18 cents a kilowatt hour during that time. And at that, they could afford to pay higher prices. At that time, they were paying us $52 a bone dry ton. All biomass is measured in bone dry ton. They paid us $52 a bone dry ton to go get that material. That made it viable, financially feasible to do that. When that plant was paid for, the PUC commissioner came back to them and said, okay, we're done with that. You now get 3 to 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Well, that literally shut us down. There's no way, they didn't even know that they would survive. They did some innovative things, some changing from base load to peak load, and they scrambled, they did everything they could to keep the doors open. But it eliminated, they could not pay $52 a bone dry ton to go into the forest. They became reliant on mill residuals coming out of the mills that were much cheaper. Their saving grace at the time happened to be that the lumber market came way up. Our mills that were operating went from single shift to 3 shifts, and the amount of mill residual increased by 2/3. And so that was one of the saving graces for Biomass One. And they still live with that problem today. So, for us as contractors, we were done delivering to Biomass One. It was over. That's what we brought material out of the woods. We can't get paid for that anymore. So we scrambled and we switched to pulpwood, which went to the Medite plant. And that worked out well for us until Roseburg Forest Products said, you know, we have a surplus of pulpwood feedstock in Roseburg, enough to feed that plant, that Medite plant down in Medford. And if we send our trucks down there with a load of pulpwood, we can bring other chips back to Coos Bay where they export them. And so they sent us a nice letter and said, thank you very much for being our supplier, but we're going to supply our own, and they bought the Medite plant. So once again, we're scrambling and we're done. And so the point I'm trying to make is if we're going to implement a project like this and consider Biomass One for disposal of our biomass, or what I would like to say is converting it to energy, then we've got to have good contracts in place. And the one that really needs to be going out there and collecting that material needs to come on board as a strategic partner to the agencies to perform that service under long-term contracts, and that would be Biomass One. They already go out and collect what they can, and they already have the trucks and the grinders and everything they need. They don't have the big trucks. They don't have the good trucks. So these trucks, these truck trailer combinations are over $500,000 a pop. They're not cheap. And that's if Western Trailer will build them for them, because everybody lost interest in it. And I asked them, I said, if we had an order for these trailers, would you build them? And they said, well, yeah, maybe if you came in and said, we want like 4 of them, we'd build them again. But that's when I talk about a paradigm shift where we have to look at long-term contracts. What's it gonna take to get this material out on a reliable basis and have this operation continue and not break down and not leave anybody out to dry. I don't get anything from Biomass One. I just put a high value on that plant and see the benefit of turning the biomass material that's available in the forest into energy, clean energy. We're not putting that particulate up in the air. So you kind of went right with me, didn't you? Some of the points, we're getting near the end here, so we're gonna have some time for questions, which is great. But some of the points that I've already made that I want to go back to is what's it gonna take to put all this together? We've operated under what was called an IDIQ, indefinite quantity, indefinite value type of contracts. That may be a consideration, but somewhere there needs to be a 5 to 10 year contract available to do this work, to get anybody to invest in it. And you'll need contractors to invest in this harvesting and biomass equipment. And whether you choose burn boxes or you choose sending it to Biomass One, it's still got to be harvested and collected and brought into landings where it can be processed and sent out to different markets. So you're not going to escape the challenge of how you're going to collect it. And some of the things, the questions that I would anticipate is so you take a typical area out on the Applegate and maybe 15% of it exceeds 40%. And you say, well, what do we do about that? Well, traditionally, what we've always done is we would just consider that to be treated by hand. The traditional way that we've always done it, but you're only talking about 10% out of the entire unit. We'll go do what we can do mechanically and efficiently. And if there's islands that protect, Terry remembers when we ran into riparian areas, we ran into different reserve areas that we didn't want to go, we just flagged them off and went around them. It really wasn't an obstacle. So, but when we talk about contracting and how this is going to happen, the big shift really comes in how we look at getting this work done in contracting. We need long-term contracts. We need contracts, that will enable the contractor to survive and look forward and make these huge investments in the equipment. Whether they buy burn boxes, at a minimum, they're gonna buy harvesters and forwarders, and each one of those is over $500,000. So for a harvester forwarder setup, there's $1 million. And, those aren't scary numbers to logging contractors. They're faced with those numbers every day. They just need to know how they're going to pay for it. So what we're offering, we have the written feasibility study coming out. That's available to anybody who wants a copy of it. It's got a lot more detail in it. It's got a lot more production numbers in it, a lot more information. We didn't want to introduce it today because simply we wouldn't have the time. It would create basically an information overload. But what we are willing to do is when you leave here today, if you would like to come back in a workshop environment and sit down and do a deep dive into this process and the costs involved and the production rates. I did not give you any harvesting production rates on purpose. Every unit that we look at is different. Every one of them is going to take something different. We don't know what the prescription might be for that unit for harvesting it. We don't know what the commercial component, all those things affect the price. We don't know how much dead and dying may be involved in that unit that has to come out. So we're saving that data for a workshop and type environment where we can sit down and put some scenarios out there and make a better decision on what's viable and what's not viable, or where you might want to go with this. So so we're certainly willing to do that, and this is kind of an exciting thing for me because it came from stewardship. I'm an innovator by nature, and I would really like to see this happen. I've seen the problems. I've fought on all the fires with our equipment, and I know what's out there. One of the areas that I've discussed with Terry in talking to the EPA and talking to the Oregon DEQ, having this conversation about burn boxes and permitting and everything, I was surprised. If I have reliable information, what they're telling me is the agencies have never reached out to them with a master plan when it comes to putting smoke and particulate into the air. We know we're gonna have so many wildland fires every year. We know about what that puts up in particulate and emissions. That's one set of values. We also know that we're gonna burn so many hand piles, or we're gonna do prescribed burning, and we're gonna have those numbers. DEQ is monitoring the smoke all the time. They're more and more concerned, particularly Jackson County commissioners, and those people are all watching the health issues with smoke. So part of the component of this is starting a discussion. I'm surprised that there's not a master plan and we're not collaborating already with the DEQ and the EPA. They are certainly, what I found out is they are certainly willing partners. They want to collaborate. I'm talking to them about burn boxes and permitting and that sort of thing. And I said, but here's the trade-off. Here's the reduced emissions. And we're working on our fuels reduction program to reduce the amount of wildland fires. It's going to reduce the amount of smoke that these wildland fires produce. So let's all work on it together. And by doing so, everyone ends up supporting it. And by having their support means that we're not going to run into the typical obstacles and surprises that we traditionally have always run into. So as part of this process, I would really encourage it, and I know Terry might even want to take it on as a project. You know, somebody needs to be collaborating with the DEQ and the federal agencies on a master plan for how we're gonna manage our forest to minimize the amount of harmful smoke and particulates we're gonna put in the air. So, these are everyone that have helped us with information and participated at some level. We're grateful for their participation and acknowledge them. Scott Kellogg, is a guy that has Ponzi equipment and would like to do a demonstration project. If there's an interest in that, that's something we can put together so we can actually see this happen. We talked to Wes Crum, gave a tour with a Ponzi representative, myself, and Scott Kellogg out on the Applegate. We looked at a lot of different units that are already permitted that we would be able to do this operation right on the land right now. So, if there's an interest in that, we would, gladly put something like that together. So, but, these are everyone that helped us and, so with that, we'll take questions.
I think one of the best things you said was paradigm shift. It is a huge shift to go from what we've always done, to where we need to go. How do you start that conversation?
Well, and I'm gonna say it's, collaboration. I'm gonna say that, it's SOFRC, it's all the partnerships that are involved. I worked on collaborative groups for years on forest health management, and put a lot of energy into that. And we really never got anywhere. We spent a lot of, the knitting circle was one of them.
Well, here's the result.
Yeah, but for years, how many years did that go on and a lot of hard work put into it? But we saw very few changes during that time. So, so with that, now, I've seen a large shift in the agencies in the last 6 years towards partnerships, collaboration, and realizing that these are resources that can get things done. And so when I say a paradigm shift, typically what we ran into in stewardship was timber departments said, no, you can't do that under stewardship. This has got to come under the timber flag, and we're going to do what we want. And county commissioners said ONC lands, which, by the way, when we talk about collaboration, our county commissioners, in my opinion, need to be involved. They need to have a seat at the table, and they need to help us choose the best method to manage the particulate smoke we put up. Our whole goal is a healthy forest and reduce wildland fires. And instead of being in an adversarial position over who gets the money, we need to be talking about, we're gonna get our forest healthy, and we're gonna slow these wildfires down as best we can. So it's a challenge. I hear you, and I know what it means, but I really believe it can happen. Yeah.
So in Southern Oregon, I know we have, we've always had, for the most part, a huge harvest workforce, in logging industry. As far as now, how do you feel we sit with having specialists, companies trained and individuals trained on the specifics of this type of harvest, instead of, green timber and I know that money fuels the type of machines we have, but how do you feel with the amount of, the capacity of contractors now and the knowledge and skill behind it? How do you feel we sit in Southern Oregon with contractors to be able to do this work?
So the constraints there are, most of the contractors, are working for the mills. The mills are buying the timber sales. If it's agency-owned timber and it goes up for a timber sale, those contractors are working for the mills and they're not decision makers. There's sufficient out there with the exception of yarders. Yarder type logging is kind of gone away and hard to find enough yarding contractors, but you know, it's kind of goes back to you create the opportunity and there'll be people, you'll be amazed at how many people come along to get the work done. But they've got to see a solid opportunity. So, and with the mills, on private ground, 99% of it in Southern Oregon is done whole tree logging because it's the most efficient. They get everything off the ground, they get it out of there, they process and limit and build these big piles in the landings, and then they go in and do a complete replant. And that's not what we're talking about for agency land and fields reduction. We're talking about thinning. We're talking about healthy forests. We're talking about silviculture prescriptions that are going to help support that healthy forest and keep it from burning. And so it's a totally different type of prescription and a different way of working. Yeah.
I think one of the main things that needs to happen is you're gonna reduce the cost if the group or agency purchases their own equipment or is granted a larger base, fund base to be able to go out and get this equipment, because now you're just talking about operators instead of contracting it, because when you contract it, you're talking a lot more money. You know, it's kind of like the self-loader operator that goes in and you have to have X amount of volume to even make money as the contractor, because the self-loader operator is gonna make most of the money, based on the timber price. So I think the idea of a large collaboration, for a long-term process, including several groups that can manage different divisions of it and asking for a very large sum of money to accomplish the task.
So that's a great thing to take on in a workshop and explore what those costs would be, whether it's agency doing it themselves, whether it's an NGO doing it, and whether SOFRC does it, whether Lomakatsi does it. But I will tell you that my life experience has taught me that the federal government is not efficient at anything. And the biggest thing that they've done poorly is to go buy equipment and think they're gonna do it themselves. And I'm not saying it's not feasible.
Well, and I'm not talking about the federal agencies, I'm talking about groups like SOFRC, Lomakatsi,
And that's
collaborative.
yes, that's a real good subject for a collaborative workshop, to work that out and throw some scenarios out there and then work that out and see what that looks like. And that I agree with, there's potential there.
So I've been working on a different angle, which is the mortality rate for hazard trees, which is huge here. And combined with what you're talking about, along with the hazard tree element, blending together groups like this to go after, and like you said, put together a master service plan for the forest. That's the way it's gonna happen. The days of the government agencies lobbying for money, it's not gonna happen.
Yep. Yep.
So I noticed Bella has a question, but I'll,
Yeah, Bella's asking a related question. Do you see this paradigm shift intersecting with Douglas for mortality moving forward?
Say that one more time.
It's up here too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So Bella's question is, how do you see this paradigm shift intersecting with Douglas fir mortality moving forward? The Douglas fir mortality is a component of what we're challenged with. We've got to deal with it, otherwise we're just leaving more fuel out there. That's gonna burn, and it's gonna burn hot, and it's gonna be hard to put out. If you're fighting a fire and you've got a draw full of that material, you're gonna stay away from it, you're not even gonna try it. It's gonna go big and it's gonna go hot. I fought enough fires and I've seen it. And, so it's a component, it's a huge component, and that's when I say, we're gonna go into a unit, we'll identify the unit, we'll identify all the dead and dying, that there's gonna be categories. Dead and dying is gonna be one of them that has to come out of there, regardless of the size of the tree or, other, environmental concerns. It's more, environmentally damaging to not take it out of there. So that's a component, and at the same time, while you're in there, if you need to thin that unit, with commercial trees at the same time, then that all needs to be done, all that work, everything is there in place to do it, get it done, and move to the next one.
So throughout your presentation, you were mentioning the importance of making sure that there's a steady supply of materials so that it's worth it for these companies to scale up to buy this expensive equipment. On the supply end, there's a lot of barriers that we face in making sure that we can guarantee that there's that amount of supply coming off the land to make sure that those operators are recovering their costs. As part of this study, did you analyze or find that there was a particular amount of volume that needs to be guaranteed to be removed per year to make it worthwhile to make these investments?
I didn't find anything that really quantified, when we talk about biomass, it doesn't go to markets like pulpwood and things like that. That actually quantified that, there's pile counts, there's all kinds of things per acre. But I couldn't really calculate that as to what that might end up. The only thing that I can say is by the amount of acreage that has to be treated. If the number is 100,000 acres a year, just to do the maintenance, we don't have a biomass supply problem. We're buried in it.
Yeah.
The problem that I see is long-term contracting. We all see administrations in our government change, policy changes, funding comes and goes, and those all affect this. This has got to be such a big plan for our forest that things like that can't interrupt it.
So that's where I threw out my idea, just to get darts thrown at it, and that would be applying the stewardship concept, goods for services, to private lands, where folks agree, because maybe you do a forest plan for them, you do it from A to Z, all the work, and they're willing to turn over, maybe it's not really valuable wood, but there is some value there. Put it into this foundation, and then that money becomes available for the next, and then you could have some sort of standards by the way it's treated. Perhaps you could fund some equipment, something like that. So anyway, I'm just throwing that out. It could be done if we all collectively, figured it out.
And, but
I guess as far as the alligator, where most of them dying material is, a lot of that is greater than slow. So is there any consideration of doing like other harvest report to do that? Then I don't think we're gonna be able to do some research.
yeah, steep slopes are a problem, and Terry asked me the other day, she saw something on machine assisted logging and that kind of work. And that's certainly available to get you on those steep slopes, but the problem is the cost goes up so fast, so high, that I would consider it prohibitive. I'm gonna say that's where it's gonna get hand treatment, it's gonna get hand piles, it's gonna get hand burned. If there's commercial harvest in there, then it's pretty much, that changes it. At that point, winch assist or something like that does become viable, because your only option is to use a log yarder, to remove that material. You're not gonna remove that material, you're not gonna remove biomass from a log yarder, excuse me. It's just not productive enough.
For openings, there's been a kind of an email discussion going around that maybe other logging makes sense, where you end up with creative openings, kind of what Danny Hamlin was doing with Armstrong Gold, where you had patches of death. Place for it, do you think?
Yeah, there's places where it can be applied, but you also have to keep in mind that some of the challenges that we've traditionally always been up against, the biggest one has always been NEPA. How do you write NEPA to encompass all this? It's hugely challenging. And we're still out there helicopter logging, out in the Applegate right now, simply because we can't get buy-off from the environmental community to do what we're doing. So those are the challenges that we're going to face. And, they're not insurmountable, but there's still things that slow us down.
Collaborative. Getting everybody to the table.
So,
I do have a question about the FORCRI project. Did you ever see cross-boundary stewardship contracts in Arizona? Like BLM and Forest Service as cooperating agencies?
I think they tried just about everything down there.
And they still fail.
The problem was when that project was being developed and put out to bid, and we were in that business, and we looked at it and we saw the prices come up. And it was so underbid. There was no way it was going to work for anyone. The contractor was destined to fail. And when I was down there, for example, they had, through grants and different funding, had funded 2 mills. One of the things that really surprised me, it was shocking, is they have ponderosa pine down there that looks just like ours. And it has no value whatsoever. It will not make lumber. It doesn't have the structural strength in it. So they're taking mature ponderosa pine, and the only market that they can find for it is pallet wood. It was hard for me to understand that. They started a biomass plant down there, and just what I'm talking about just happened down there this last year. They got behind on stewardship projects and everything, and there wasn't any material to go to the biomass plant. And the biomass plant was in jeopardy of going bankrupt and going under. And so when I say, if you make a commitment and you expect people, entrepreneurs, to make investments, to process this material, to make all this work, it's gotta be long-term and it can't be canceled.
So if it's obviously a large investment, and if you're trying to do, let's say, thousands of acres a year, why not look for multiple, forest products on a smaller scale? Yeah, we're not doing the, hundreds or thousands of ton a year, and no, we're not producing X amount of board foot, but why not have multiple products on a small scale?
So, and that was one of the points that I was trying to make earlier, that if you reliably bring material that has potential for products out of the woods, there are entrepreneurs that will figure out what to do with it and make something out of it. And that suppressed Doug fir was just one example, but there's a lot of other examples for wood that's out there on that Applegate, that if you can reliably bring it out, someone will figure out what to do with it, and it will have a value, and it's gonna overall, it's going to reduce the cost of fuels reduction, because you have reduced it. So, the emphasis is Once you start down that road and you build those markets, you create the markets and you build them because something became available that wasn't ever available before. You create that market and you build on it, you can't stop. Or it's gone, it goes, and they won't come back. So, that's how it works, but yeah, you're exactly right. You're exactly right, but we have a postal pole yard in White City. They'll take a lot of that wood. Small diameter, and I think they only deal in Doug fir, but small diameter Doug fir, they'll take that, they'll buy it. But if you become a contractor for them and or a supplier for them, they want to know that you're gonna be bringing that material every month, every day, year in, year out. You know, they don't wanna upsize their production based on what you're bringing them to see it fail.
So Corey, what's the potential for other kinds of markets here? Mass timber or
For other kind of markets of low value.
just a steady supply? Doesn't even have to just be low
So
value.
you're gonna say, including timberland, groundwood, some to the sawmill. And there's incredible demand for sawmill. There's incredible demand for sawmill material. I can't really speak on, there's effectively no demand for non-commercial, non-commercial residuals, basically. Anything slash, certainly not,
Yeah.
even small diameter roundwood. There's some post and pole. That market has more or less reached its demand capacity. There's not demand out there waiting for more post and pole. It's kind of matched. And the Intermountain does, a little bit more scale than we can, or than we do at least here, with their logical, but I just don't see a ton of growth. I'm not really familiar with biochar. I don't know what value there is in stuff like that. I know biomass one takes what they can in terms of, a lot of those low residuals. But even you said that they aren't able to bring in, tops piles from the woods, ship them, bring them to the facility. They still rely on a very localized source.
Their cost has been completely reset with what they get for their power. So that eliminates going out very far. They can go out and correct me if I'm wrong there, but you can go out and if you've got a good transportation route and everything works out mathematically, they can go get it, but otherwise it's gone. And so that doesn't mean it can't happen, but what it does mean is it's gonna be subsidized. It's gonna be an expense to the project.
Yeah, everything you talked about here really it boils down to the economics. That's really,
Exactly.
whether it's the Tiger Cat burn box or whatever, it's got a pencil. If it doesn't pencil, it's not gonna happen.
Right.
And there's two ways of making that pencil. Having a product that pays its way out of the woods, or having some form of subsidy or grant that makes the process whole. And the problem with that is there's a limit to, how much people are willing to write a check for. And so to your point, that's the reason why it hasn't happened.
Now, the third way is just thinking about fuel treatments, but you find a way to reduce the cost.
Well, that's right. That's right. I guess to have one last thought, I guess there's a question begging to be answered, and that's pay me now or pay me later.
Yeah.
And how much money are we spending on firefighting?
Right.
And all those other things.
$2,000
Yeah.
Where does the price per ton for biochar compare to other, biomass-based materials, like between pellets, biochar, hog fuel, a lot of these individuals? Where do the waste go? What is the demand for biochar right now? Is it an undeveloped market? Is it
Well, it's an underdeveloped market right now, and part of the problem that we didn't even talk about, for the potential for biochar is carbon sequestration, carbon credits. I've watched that market, I belong to the Biochar Institute, and I belong to it just to get the knowledge of what's going on. And, carbon credits all of a sudden look like they're gonna work and people can get them. Then all of a sudden the problem comes up, you're not gonna get them, but there have been some carbon credits issued and some sold. So that's a big factor. Where that's gonna go, is really undetermined today. But there's potential for carbon credits. There's one of the things you have to remember, there's all types of biochar. And, so when you look at the use for biochar, some of it's very specific to the pyrolysis that developed it and what it's useful for. And so what we're looking at in these burn boxes is a fairly low quality biochar that's just coming right off the bottom of a fire. And it's very similar to what they get now in the kilns, the portable kilns that they're using, pretty much the same thing. So, but one of the, when we talk about funding these projects and, when we talk about treating, 100,000 acres or whatever scale you want to look at it on, is under stewardship contracting, the timber that was sold, if there's a commercial component on the project, and that material, that wood is sold, the receipts are brought back in to treat more land. And I don't see how we're going to ignore that, for our future of fuels reduction and forest treatment. The costs are astronomical, but they can be offset if we can keep those receipts. Somebody mentioned the day of, selling timber for big prices for the agency is gone. And that really rang true to me. It really is. They can do it, but they won't get everything done there. They're gonna leave you a big pile in the landing, and even though they have, disposal costs and everything built into the timber sale, it never happens. Doesn't happen very often. So, you know, when we say paradigm shift, how do we look at how we're gonna get this work done? How are we gonna pay for it? How are we gonna pay for it if we say we're going to do 20,000 acres a year mechanically? Where's the money gonna come from? We have grants and things, but we're already learning that may not be the money there that we would like to have, or what we're gonna need to treat it. It may not be able to rely on that. It may be that we look at timber receipts. Some of these timber receipts have to go into this. Those are all items for the workshop.
I just want to make a comment that bringing a lot of the environmental groups into the workshop, I think would be really proactive in getting in front of a lot of those lawsuits. There's a huge amount of emphasis and money going into offshore wind development on the coast right now, which is a huge issue. And I feel like if you talked about the economics of producing a new type of wind energy off the coast and the cost of installing and potential environmental impacts of that action versus treating forest land and preventing wildfire, there'd be some very clear economic incentives for those groups to get involved in biochar production, specifically over alternative forms of energy.
So with years of collaborative groups and that sort of thing, I couldn't agree with you more. And I come from a background that required some really tough collaboration with environmentalists. Not only from forest health, but for years, I was president of a local motorcycle club here that did trail riding. And we were the bad guys, and I couldn't defend myself in most cases. But by becoming proactive, that's the key word, becoming proactive, meeting with the environmentalists, meeting with the Applegate Partnership, and saying, hey, we're concerned about the environment too. Can we come volunteer to do your stream restoration? How can we help you? We turned that whole thing around. And I am a big proponent of including the environmental community in developing solutions to our problems.
Because there's also been pushback on biochar and biochar production facilities, just in water intake and smoke emissions, that kind of thing. So,
Yep.
yeah, I just want to, I guess, turn it on its head is what you have to do.
Yeah.
You know, another idea, you know, you talk about bioenergy. It would be a good idea to sit at the table with Pacific Power and see if they can integrate some money into a potential energy source like that, which could literally increase. I know Southern California was doing it. They allocated something like $60 billion for a bioenergy plant. And we're sitting on tons of energy sitting out there phase two fire, we don't even touch it. Stands there, if fuel loads, we have a bigger problem.
So, Pacific Power would be a difficult, level to try and implement anything like that with. Back when we were doing this, we did a lot of work on trying to develop another site for a biomass plant. And through that, I really got the education of what it takes to build a biomass plant and fund it and then support it and that sort of thing. And it takes you, Darren, correct me if I'm wrong, but it takes you right to the PUC commissioner, not Pacific Power. And they're gonna determine the rates, and a lot of that rate is based on power that Bonneville produces. You've gotta convince the legislators in Oregon that this is more valuable. This is not Bonneville. And, that's where you're getting into, you're on the right track, but it's gotta go way above Pacific Power.
Well, if you think about it, if you can communicate with environmentalists and make some headway, that is a possible route.
Yeah, it is, and those are all considerations, and I'm a big proponent of, look at what this plant, our local plant does for our community in producing now. It used to be, I don't know what the numbers are today, but I can tell you that 10 years ago, Biomass One had the capacity, and you're at 26 or 28, kilowatt or megawatts right now. That was enough power to supply the entire Rogue Valley at the time, if they needed to. Is that correct? That used
It's enough for about 27,000 homes.
yeah, 27,000 homes. So, that's a huge contribution, and it doesn't work everywhere. It only works where you got a biomass problem. And we have a biomass problem.
Comment, then an observation. Excuse me. One thing I haven't heard mentioned here today are insurance companies. And how insurance, they're all gonna be impacted by insurance, if we haven't already. Our insurance rates are going up or being dropped completely because of wildfire risk. So I think part of this equation is working with legislatures and insurers to quantify the avoided loss by doing these types of treatments.
Right.
To fund some of this work.
Right.
And I know, in my line of work, we do work with some insurers that are interested in looking at funding some of this type of work. So I think it's an emerging thing that's real, that with groups like this can help drive that conversation. I think legislature is part of it, but I also think just grassroots, local organized communities approaching these organizations with an ask is also another opportunity. And an observation from today is like, there is no silver bullet here, right? It's a bunch of different tools to meet a bunch of different issues. I think contracting is a big one that could actually be shifted pretty quickly. So the decision makers that are in the room still, make contracts larger with more optional items. That's easy. Make them larger with more optional items. Fund your core piece of work and have a laundry list of things that if funding becomes available, you can execute on quickly. That helps to shift some of that stability and instability in some of these fickle markets. We all know like funding is not secure, but funding will happen, funding will come in one form or another. So the better that folks can be positioned to execute on that stuff, I think the better off we'll be in the long run.
So, with your comment, breaking news the other day, California just approved a 22% rate hike for State Farm for home insurance. 22% rate increase.
Which surprised State Farm hasn't left California,
Yeah.
because that's the option.
Yeah.
They want to
Going to.
Yeah.
Like
And
the other big three port companies have already left.
so that validates what you're saying. And for us, here we are again, back at the, Oregon Department of Forestry fire hazard map.
Yep.
And, the insurance companies don't totally know what they're looking at, but whatever they see in it, they don't like. Where I live in the foothills up here, most hazardous area you can be in the valley, but yet we've done fuels treatment all around our property. Everything is secure. We don't get any credit for that. There's a lot of work to be done there, and I think you're on the right track. We don't know where all the potential funding sources can come from. But this could have really good potential. Insurance companies have a vested interest in funding some of this work.
And that leads to the observation that this really is a solvable problem. It's got lots of things that have to be resolved, but it's not like hurricane season. We know if we treat our fuels, fire costs will go down, and therefore homes will be safe. I mean, it's solvable. That's the positive side of it. Gary.
I was gonna say that this whole afternoon has been talking about the nuts and bolts of how to approach the problem that we're experiencing. And what thinking, and we're just now beginning to talk about it, is that the paradigm shift is political. And it requires a lot more knowledge about a lot of people in order to accept and understand the scale of a problem. One of the things we're touching on, right now, is the insurance, one of the very strong avenues is the insurance problem. Because that's going right to people's park and right where they're living. And it's only part of it. Insurance companies, they don't need the state map to know what their problems are. They've got it figured out. They don't care what the state is doing. But one of the things that might reach politicians is that if this goes bigger, and which it will unless they really do something dramatic about it, you're talking about homes in communities like Ashland, where the entire city is underwater relative to the value of their property and the cost of insuring it. And that's going to drive the insurance, not only will it drive the insurance companies out, it will bankrupt city municipalities. And I guarantee you that's going to get people's attention. And that's the kind of thing that needs to be talked about. And that's one of the reasons why I'm sitting here, because I represent an organization that's very concerned about the whole big picture. Because understanding that big picture and being able to communicate it effectively is what's going to allow the details that you're talking about, and finding good ways to approach those details. Basically, enough people coming to the table, as the lady up there mentioned, bringing environmental organizations in, talking about it as comprehensive a way as possible. Because it's bigger than any organization that you can talk about.
Right.
It's absolutely, and people don't understand it. Most people are just trying to get to work and go home, And until it starts beating them on the head, and that's actually what we're facing. I mean, addressing some of the complexities that you're referring to is bigger than that. You need to be able to talk to feds. You need to be able to talk to the state legislature, and they can understand it. I mean, they're not dumb, but you need enough people to bring up a level of awareness enough that it gets people's enough attention that we can actually begin to create that paradigm shift in order to address the problem. And, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. The paradigm shift is going to be one of the tough components in this whole thing.
Well, we're about 10 minutes past our time. Any burning last minute questions?
I
Yeah,
would be remiss
absolutely.
to not mention that Ivy Frog works with a partner, Wilson Biochar Associates, whose book came out, the Biochar Handbook, Chelsea Publishing, and maybe somebody from Grayback Forestry is mentioned in there for working with them for such a long time, over 10 years, on these homegrown solutions to fuels reduction in our forests. I mean, it's a small scale, but it has potential to expand its model into greater.
But it's a great solution. I mean, people taking care of their property, my God, what a concept.
Neighbors of federal lands, that cross boundary, what Tabitha said, that is where I think the rubber hits the road is, I don't expect BLM and Forest Service ownership to not do that perfectly, but we could, with intelligence, we could link them together.
What you just said was interesting, is getting people to care. What I think I've seen a lot of getting people to understand.
That's
Because
right.
science
Before
has
they
never been explained to the point where the general
That's right.
public can
That's right.
understand.
And
Yeah.
that's why the education part is important.
Yeah.
But also, it's culture. It's
Yeah.
a culture of, you don't put your old washers in the stream anymore, it's not part of your habits anymore.
Visited lately.
And you take care of the density near your roads. It's part of
I
what
thought
you
that
do.
was a building code, blue tarp and dead car.
Hey, so part of this awareness that you guys are talking about, some form of a media documentary, social media division has to be created, not to combat environmentalism, but to speak the truth and the science behind what you're talking about. This is how you reach the masses. This is how you reach the public. Money allocated for just a group that goes out and develops this kind of commentary, will make a huge difference. You see, the environmentalists are doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, not that they're exactly truthful, but there are components where also
Well-
backing the agencies up.
Yeah, that's where proactive outreach is critical. And it's a process, and, people aren't gonna draw the, conclusion right away. It's gonna take multiple meetings and that sort of thing to get people to understand, what we're trying to accomplish and what the options are to get there.
Let's workshop it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're a good leader for a good workshop.
Oh, thank you. You're too kind.